Hi class, today we're going to be looking at the next lesson in unit number 3, production issues. But as usual, we'll start by taking up the homework, and so please ensure that you take a look at my answers and compare them with yours to make sure that you have full understanding of the previous lesson, and send me questions if you have any misunderstandings or concerns. So continue, take a look, and we will get through. Pause when you need to pause just to check over your work. So today, production issues. Our learning goals are know how to evaluate the pros and cons of a market structure or economic situation, be able to determine a necessary course of action by a firm or a government, understand why and when government intervention can be necessary. And so for success criteria, we'll discuss production issues and the equality/equity of certain citizens and choices. And also we want to have completion of review and homework as usual. So, to review last lesson, we want to look at this spectrum of types of firms, right? When we go from many producers to one producer, which type of structure has many producers versus which type of structure has one producer. And so if you look at the spectrum of types of firms and structures, you'll have perfect competition being a structure where there are many firms and many producers, while monopolistic is next, which also has many, but some are starting to get larger. Oligopoly has very few large firms, and monopoly is just single producer. So the question is, are firms better for the economy, right? Are larger firms better for the economy? So if we take time to think about it, what are we trying to accomplish here? Like when we think about efficiencies, productivity, production of goods and services, competition, you might think that firms are better, or larger firms are better, but are there cases where larger firms are actually worse? And so let's examine both of these scenarios. So yes, bigger is better. Larger firms can achieve economies of scale. Larger firms can create theoretically more jobs. They can have lower prices of goods and services. Economic activity can increase variety of products. Capital-intensive production is more efficient, and so larger firms have more capital-intensive production, technology, innovation. All of these things are accomplished when you start to grow and are able to create production efficiencies. However, this goal, trying to become larger and more powerful and stronger firms, this leads to oligopoly and monopoly, right? If we start a perfect competition with lots and lots of small firms with little power, then we start to get to monopolistic competition where some of these firms start to grow larger, yet there are still many large firms and many small firms. But ultimately, as these firms continue to grow in strength, the smaller firms start to die away. They can't compete. They get bought out. They get engulfed, right? And then you get large firms of oligopoly, and ultimately you'd end up getting monopoly. And so as we pursue large-size firms to achieve the economies of scale and the efficiencies, we risk doing the thing that we're actually trying to avoid, right? We want large firms to get this and to increase competition, but the existence and the emergence of oligopolies and monopolies, they will stop that. They actually reduce competition. So increased productivity and efficiency benefits consumers in the shorter term because of all this, because economies of scale, because of lower prices, right? But ultimately, eventually, if larger firms become more productive and more efficient and become oligopoly and monopoly, competition will go down, prices will go up, profits will go up. So when we can keep competition high, prices will be lower, variety will be better, more jobs, more innovation, more quality, because there are larger, powerful firms, but there's still lots of competition. We want that high competition, yet lots of economies of scale and efficiencies. And then eventually, in the longer term, if this keeps on going, these large firms become oligopolies, competition goes down, prices end up going up, and profits will go up for them. And so it's a kind of a double-edged sword that we're dealing with. We want to pursue these types of things, yet we don't want to pursue them too much. So if we continue this conversation, we might get to a point where we think of what are we sacrificing, right? So we pursue, trying to get bigger, stronger, more efficient, but at what cost, right? So we talked about the competition cost, right? People not doing as well because competition has gone down, prices have gone up. But there are other costs to a primary focus on productivity and efficiency. And these could be called third-party costs sometimes, right? The cost of environmental degradation, right? The cost of pollution, the cost of many, many things, right? So third-party costs are social costs and can result from focus on productivity and efficiency and profit. So what here is the problem actually? The problem is that as we look at trying to get better, we're going to start to ignore some of the things that have impacts to society as a byproduct of me trying to get more money, or me trying to get faster, or me trying to do better, right? So think about if you are in a transaction, say you are buying cigarettes from a cigarette company, or you buy a car from a car company, right? You are creating a transaction that you benefit from and the company benefits from, but it's going to impact the livelihoods, or it's going to impact the life of other people, right? The other people are the third party. I don't smoke, so you buying cigarettes and making this cigarette company bigger, and you smoking cigarettes causing pollution and causing secondhand smoke for myself, I'm a third party. I am suffering the cost of that transaction, okay? All of these types of things, pollution, unemployment, depletion of resources, waste, lack of saving, etc., these are costs that other people and you as well may bear by this transaction. And so if we are too focused on efficiency and profit, we may lose sight of some of the things that we are going to destroy, which might be pollution, any types of these things, right? As we discover new things that are happening to our environment, as we discover new things that are happening to our planet, we may have to stop thinking about trying to be more efficient, right? Because why is efficiency always the goal, right? The efficiency maybe shouldn't be the goal. But of course, we're talking about economics. We want to be more efficient, but at what cost? Okay? So, to create a better system, if we are too focused on self-interest, if we're too focused on companies trying to get more efficient, we are risking the third-party costs. We're risking those types of things. And so maybe we need to have ways to regulate stuff. And right, this word regulation, we know it to be inefficient. We know government intervention to be inefficient. So we need to be very careful with what we want to be done in regulated environments, yet knowing that in some cases we want regulated environments. And so you can see in our economy there is a split between private and public goods. And so the argument to have some things privatized versus some things government run is going to be a debate for the end of time, right? All of our government services require us to spend tax dollars or require us to allocate funds in different areas. And so do governments want to accumulate more deficits and more debt to fund these types of things? Would we rather them become privatized endeavors, right? So again, you might think private is better, but the roads that you drive on are public projects, right? The water that you drink is a public project, right? So don't be too quick to judge either way being worse or better. You need to be able to discern what needs to happen in what scenarios. And so is regulation and intervention the answer? And I would say in some cases, right? Regulating how companies produce and the impact of profits could curtail problems of third-party costs, but there's a sacrifice that companies have to make, right? Because the government doesn't want profit-motivated companies to sacrifice our public interests. Why? Because the government or the economy, that's not the goal. The goal is not for companies to make profits, although we understand that the profit motive is what drives lots of these companies, right? So the government needs to maintain fair competition. We don't want to get to points of oligopoly and monopoly where these companies get too powerful. right? The government wants to have prices as low as possible for consumers. They want to have more choice, right? We don't want to have consumers only have one choice of vendor to buy from. They want to increase the quality of product, of course. But while doing all these things, we must ensure that companies can make enough money. We must ensure that the business environment is there for companies. Otherwise, they're not going to want to stay here, right? We need to balance the needs of our citizens with creating an attractive business environment for companies. Otherwise, the companies will leave. Ultimately, the government must balance the goal of the firm, which is to make profit, with the goal of the economy, which is to satisfy and respond to consumer and public needs and wants. And so this is the ebb and flow, or the back and forth in terms of government policy. Who am I trying to satisfy? Who am I trying to ensure is better off? And so our people, our public, they are part of the marketplace. And the firms are also part of the marketplace, right? So the government is looking at how to, I guess, intervene or how to influence these markets. And so it's very important to understand what is this market, right? The market is the needs and wants of the people. It's prices, profits, affordability. And that's just demand, basically, right? And so the government needs to understand how people consume, right? How people are choosing to consume, what they're choosing to consume, balance with how much income they have, how much things cost. So this is the market, this is the people, right? This is the demand of what your economy and your people want, right? So the government needs to figure out, how am I going to ensure that our people get what they need and want, while maintaining that profits are good for our companies. And so we've satisfied the how to produce, we've satisfied the what to produce. And so the third argument, or third question, talks about for whom to produce. And so basically we can produce everything now, like within certain imagination, right? How we produce it is also known. We just let free markets do it, and the government will choose to produce certain types of things that the free markets won't do, or the government thinks that we need to intervene with. And so the final question is the for whom, right? We have to ask about equity, equality, and efficiency. Who gets what, why, and how. Are we talking about being fair or impartial? Are we talking about giving equal treatment to everybody? Or are we talking about being equal in status and opportunity and rights, right? And so, again, our economy is choosing for whom gets what, or for whom should have access to everything. Things like healthcare, right? There are private healthcare clinics that cost lots of money that everyone does not have access to because of wealth. Yet, our healthcare system provides generally equal access to anyone and everyone who lives in our country. Whereas in the United States and other countries, some of these things are different, right? Or is it more important to be impartial? Everyone gets equal treatment versus opportunity, education. And so these are questions that every government has to answer in different industries, with different products, consumer products versus utility type products. So there's no real answer in terms of for whom should get what. It's just based on your perspective. And we live in Canada, so our government has a certain perspective. Each political party has a certain perspective, right? And so it's very important to understand, where is that perspective coming from, and why does this group of people choose this perspective versus a different perspective, right? And so how would you choose for whom things are produced for, versus how does our government choose, versus how might I choose, or your neighbor choose, right? You will choose one thing because of your demographic or your wealth or whatever it may be, right? And so someone else who has a different demographic than you, or different wealth status or economic prosperity than you might choose a different for whom. And so that was the quick lesson today for production issues. And so again, please ask me some questions. If you need any answers, send me messages on Edsby or whatnot. Thank you.